Well, it's close enough to 2:45 here. We can get started. Just want to welcome everybody. We're pleased to share that this session is sponsored by CUNA Mutual Group. This is promoting mental health literacy via social media, a case history of @BIPOC_mental health on Instagram. And I want to introduce you to Miss Hannah Glenn. Hannah is a doctoral student in counseling psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Hannah started @BIPOC_mental health on Instagram in February 2021 after receiving a scholarship to complete a 5-week course in digital growth for health professionals, and won Best in Show for @BIPOC_mental health at the UW-Madison Digital Salon in April 2021. In addition to providing psychotherapy, Ms. Glenn is an instructor for clinical communication course at UW-Madison.
There we go. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me now. But yeah, I normally hit a 3 o'clock slump, so if you all are feeling that, I hope that this is lively and keeps you moving. But I'm going to be talking about my mental health account that I created. And so just a brief agenda is that we're going to talk about health information online. We'll talk about viral misinformation on social media, or just information that is largely sensationalized and kind of clickbaity. I'll introduce you to my account and what that is. I'll talk about how to present evidence-based information to a lay audience, as well as digital growth and resisting the lure of topics that are pretty trendy in your field, as well as professional ethics and how to handle hostile responses. And I just want to name that if you have questions that come up, please feel free to ask them during the presentation. There will also be time at the end for questions as well. And so we'll just go ahead and kick it off, but raise your hand if you have ever Googled something health related. Yes, everybody's hands are up. Next one, raise your hand if you have ever stumbled across health information on social media. Yes, nearly everybody. And raise your hand, for those of you who are health professionals and working in the field with patients or clients, raise your hand if anyone has ever told you about something that they learned about online. Yes, about half of the folks in this room raised their hands. And so the thing that I just want to name is that people are learning a lot of information online. And it's a key means of information searching. This is how people are engaging with health information. And there are 70,000 health-related Google searches that are taking place every single minute, and this is 7% of all Google searches. And users, when they are Googling information, they typically use Google as the home base, and that is where they start, and they are looking at information starting from search result number 1, and then they go down to the bottom. We know that Mayo Clinic has introduced their cool new thing with health information, where it's the very first thing that pops up, which I think is really fantastic for evidence-based information being what comes up as number 1. But people will begin scrolling through, and that's how they're accessing information. So there are a lot of questions about how the algorithm is working and what types of sources of information are being shown. But right now, Google's doing a pretty good job at naming the evidence-based sources. But other things to note with this is that when people are searching for information online, they are really piecing together and integrating information based on their various interests and medical thought styles. And so this is where people might tend to fall into confirmation bias, where there might be something that they are interested in, or they think that this is going to be the route that will help them with their problem, and that's going to be the information that they're piecing together. But ultimately, people, they prioritize fact-finding while also gaining insight into other people's experiences as part of the same process. And people use social media, more specifically, to inform their self-management strategies, as well as to draw on other people's experiences, or to look at niche content brought together by issue-specific communities. And so they might join a community of someone who's having a similar experience as themselves, and they're able to engage and talk about that information. This slide moves really slow. But with that, individuals are seeking information online when offline support is unavailable or not helpful. They're not able to access care if they don't understand what their providers are telling them, if the information that they're receiving doesn't make sense to them, that's where they might go online to learn the information for themselves. But with that, a major benefit of social media and the internet for health communication is that it's really fantastic for accessibility and widening access of health information to various population groups, regardless of age, education, race, ethnicity, where they live, more or even better than traditional communication methods, because it is something that is widely available. Many people are on the internet, and this is their experience of it. They have access to information at the tip of their hands. I don't know about you, but my phone is right there, and if I had something that I wanted to look up, I could go do that right now and in this very moment. But with that, social media really allows for these peer-to-peer interactions, which may challenge the expectations, relationships, and quality and consistent healthcare practice, because people are engaging with this information in different ways. It's not just happening from patient or client to the provider. And because of that, there is a strong need for health providers to maintain a role within social media health communication that is not the same as the ways that they are engaging with this information in their offices or even when they're working with other individuals. And so with that, it's maintaining these types of professional roles in these social media spaces in order to share that health information with folks. So now I'm going to briefly talk about misinformation. And misinformation is something that is false information that is spread regardless of the intent to mislead. And so social networking sites like Facebook have high levels of user engagement and utilize an algorithm that shows users similar content, which therefore allows this misinformation to thrive in the absence of easily accessible and credible information. And if we think about, Facebook has come under a lot of fire lately mainly for its role in spreading misinformation. It has even led to it rebranding, the Facebook headquarters rebranding as Meta, if you'll notice some of those changes if you are using those websites. And so that's part of the role that it has in the ways that this information spreads. The things that I want you to think about is that the way information that is spreading most frequently is the information that is sensationalized, that is highly emotional, and that is polarizing. And so I'm going to show examples of something that I think is sensationalized, something that is highly emotional, and something that is polarizing. And so with the sensationalized one, we have, this is from Fox News, and where the title, I think, is clickbaity because it says, "Hospital denies unvaccinated patient spot on active kidney transplant list." And that's what comes up. So what it does is it's going to draw interest. People are going to be like, what is this? What does this mean? Oh my gosh, they were denied. And it's going to raise questions and interest. And so it's sensationalized because it's going to attract your attention. But with that, if you click on the article, it says that every transplant center really evaluates the patients that are on the transplant list. But that's not what's being showed in the social media post. And so we have to think about the ways that we are actually posting information and how people are going to react. So it's going to bring on a reaction. The next one, I think, is one that's highly emotional. This actually came up in my own feed. I didn't have to search for this one. Where it says that anxiety is caused by toxic heavy metals that are in your body, and that is the source of it, or that it's because you have a virus present, and that is what the source of it is. And that is just not correct. Anxiety is an emotional, it's an emotion, and everybody experiences anxiety. And so what this is doing is it's really relating to a person's feelings, or is causing this emotional response, which might be fear of, oh my goodness, I get anxious sometimes. Do I have a toxic heavy metal in my body, or if I come in contact with the virus, where it's pulling on those emotions, it makes people feel nervous and afraid. And then this one that I have that is polarizing is related to masks, which have been a topic of heated debate for a while at this point. And so it says, you don't need this man's permission to celebrate Christmas with your family. And this one, I wanted to keep the caption for this one because it says that his mask should have clowns on it. I just thought that was funny. And so with that, it's something that's polarizing, where it's going to continue to divide folks into these two very sharply contrasting groups, where there is a strong opinion about something. Because people are going to have a strong opinion, they're going to react to it. And then because they're reacting to it, it's going to get shared more frequently. I want to show you what that looks like. So remember, we have sensationalized, we have highly emotional, and we have polarizing information. And all of those together cause a reaction, where it's either tugging on your emotions, it's causing really big interest, you're you're wondering about it. And so it's happening on these social media sites. And so therefore, because you're reacting to it, you're probably going to be more likely to like it. You're probably going to comment. This might be where some of those like Facebook arguments start. You might share it with other people that's like, oh my goodness, please look at this. And so that's what's happening on these social media things. And that is what allows this information to thrive. And ultimately, it repeats. And so because you've shared it with someone else, they're going to feel sensationalized. They're going to feel polarized. It might pull on their emotions. And then it continues to cycle through. And so that is how information spreads on social media. And that's what makes information spread rapidly and quickly. But what I want to name is that we can take those things where information is sensationalized, is polarizing, and where it is highly emotional, and use those to our advantages as folks who are working in healthcare in order to have that same information spread. And I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. But I'm going to transition into showing you my mental health account that I created. And so this is what it looks like. All the screenshots of my account were taken a month ago today, so this was March 5th. It's at BIPOC_mental health. Part of the reason that I created this account was because I saw that a lot of people were engaging with mental health information online. I work with college students a lot, and I was in a mentoring role. This was even before COVID, where someone was having relationship problems. I think she was a freshman at this point. And she said, Hannah, I did some Instagram therapy so I could figure out like what to do about this. And I was like, what is Instagram therapy? And I was very concerned and nervous. And she showed me what this looks like. And I was like, oh no, this is not therapy. This is not it. And that was something that felt concerning to me. So I think that's what planted the seed for me, is like, this is the information that people are engaging with. It is sensationalizing, it is highly emotional, it's drawing interest, it's polarizing, and that's what allows it to spread and peaks into that interest. And so once we get to COVID hits March 2020, and I'm seeing so many people engaging with the same information online. Or they're engaging with health info, it's being shared, it's being spread. So many conversations about mental health are actually taking place on these websites about health information, about mental health, and how to get through quarantine was all really being spread rapidly. And I didn't feel like a lot of the information was credible or accurate, and that felt concerning to me. And so that's kind of what planted the seed for me to create this. And I did a lot of reading to figure out, like, what is this and how do I do this? Do I have time for this? I don't even know what to post or share. How do I make content? And so there were a lot of like structural and logistical things. But this is what my account looks like as of a month ago. And so the things that I do is I share information that I think is going to be culturally relevant for communities who are interested in engaging with this type of information online. And so every post that I have comes from a social justice lens. It has a multicultural approach, and this is the psychologist that I'm being trained to be, and therefore that is the information that I'm sharing online. There are some posts that do better than others, and I'll dive into some of my top performing posts and the reasons why I think that they do really well. But this is just generally what it looks like. But the things that I think is most interesting is the numbers and how the things that I'm creating spread. And so that's what I want to really highlight here, is that in this 90-day span from December 5th, 2021 to March 4th, 2022, my posts reached 16,297 different accounts. And that is just absolutely baffling to me, that 16,000 people saw something that I had created. And so I hold that as naming, like, when we create this information, like, people are going to see it, and it allows us to put ourselves out there. And when we look at going down to the next one, it's unique accounts that are interacting with the content. That is 5,715 people. So that means that over that 3-month span, there were 5,700 people who liked or commented or interacted with something that I had created. And then the number of unique people who were following my account was 2,560 people, which is a lot of people when we think about it in that sense. And the things that I had created had been seen on, or had been looked at, a total of 33,480 times, where that means it's coming up in people's feeds. People might go and look at it again, they're looking at it twice, where this is what they're looking at. And so again, like, when we put ourselves in this space, there's a need for it. The information will be shared and it will be spread. And so to even break down some of the numbers that also continue to baffle me, focusing on my reach, this is the 16,297. 58% of those are in the United States, 7.4% of them are in the United Kingdom, 6.2% are located in Canada, and 5.7% are in India. And when we break it down by city, this is always so interesting to me how this happens, but most of the 16,000 who had seen my content, 4.3% of them were located in New York City. And I am based here in Madison, Wisconsin, so that is another thing that is, thank you. Great. The next breakdown, the next largest, 1.4% in Los Angeles, California. Again, thank you. I don't know how you're finding it, but great. And then 1.2% of the reach is right here in Madison, Wisconsin, and 1% in Philadelphia. So I have some general guesses as to why this is. And so number one, New York and LA both have pretty high population densities. There's a lot of people there, and so maybe that's leading to information being spread there because there are more people. Just a guess. I also mentioned that I mentored students, and in that mentorship program, they were being recruited from Los Angeles, Chicago, DC, and New York. And so if any of them follow my account, then maybe it's possible that it's being shared that way and then allowed it to spread. I'm not sure. And then Madison, I think that makes sense. Madison is my home base. This is where I'm at. This is where my professional network is. This is where my colleagues are. This is where my colleagues' friends are. And so that makes sense to me. And then Philadelphia, I have one of my closest friends from high school is a flight attendant. She's currently based in Philadelphia. And she has one of her other really great flight attendant friends runs a Bookstagram account, which is an Instagram account where she shares book reviews, and she's based in Philadelphia. So if she's ever shared any of my posts, I think that explains Philadelphia. I don't know. And so the point, I show this to you because it's naming that when we get out there, our information will be shared across the country and across the world as well. And then to break it down even further, all these graphs actually come from Instagram, where Instagram creates these for you. And so 45% of the people who I'm reaching with my content are between the ages of 25 to 34. That's also another one that makes sense to me because that's my age demographic. And so also millennials, we really love Instagram. That is our favorite, and that is our go-to social media. And then 18 to 24, that is Gen Z. And they don't really love Instagram as much as millennials do. They're all on TikTok. And so I recognize that they are a larger percentage, but that's also a pretty steep drop-off between 25 to 34. Other guesses with the other two age demographics would be that maybe there are other therapists who follow me who are interested in this, who are also sharing the content. So I don't know. These are all just guesses, but this is the people that my content is reaching. And 85% of them are women. And 14.2% of them are men. Instagram does operate on that gender binary. To break it down into followers, so this is of the 2,500 folks who do follow the account, you'll see that 88% of those are women and 12% are men. Similarly with age demographics, 25 to 34 is the largest demographic, followed by 35 to 34. And then one thing that surprised me when I created this is the 13 to 17, 1% of my followers are in really young teenagers. I don't know what to make of that. I'm glad that they found me. And then to break down locations, 5% are in Madison, which again makes sense. These are my friends. This is my professional network. Next up is New York with 4.5%. This is one that I've really been rooting on. I want that to eventually overtake Madison, because then that will mean that's organic growth and it's not just people who know me. And then 3% in Los Angeles. That one also, I don't know. 2.2% in Chicago. I imagine proximity to Madison might begin to explain that. I don't know. And then 1.6% in Indianapolis. That one makes sense to me because Indianapolis is my hometown, so those are probably more people who know me and are seeing information that I'm creating. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to break down some of these top performing posts. The things that I want you to remember are that we have information that is sensationalized, highly emotional, polarizing. This leads to reaction, which leads to people sharing the information, which then leads to other people following into the cycle. And we use that to our advantage in order to really use social media to our advantage. And so this is my top performing post of all time. I think this one is sensational, And it's also pretty emotional based on the caption that I wrote. And so I posted this on July 28th, 2021 during the Summer Olympics, right when Simone Biles said that she was going to take a step back from the Olympics. And so I didn't create this post. I wish that I did. This was just a repost, and I selected the image because I thought it was really pretty. The colors were similar to the ones that I was already using on my account, so I was able to maintain like a color scheme, and that was some of the intention there. But I was actually like, part of the reason why I decided to repost it was because I was 2 weeks away from getting married, and I was so stressed, and I was panicking, and I was like, I don't have time to create a whole post about this. But what I wanted to do was, I knew that this was a topic that was resonating with people, and people were talking about it all across social media. It was all over my feeds. And I was like, I think this is also an opportunity where I can step in and make that happen. And so I also noticed that this is a Black woman who's talking about mental health, and so I wanted to be able to uplift that conversation, be able to continue having it in my space. And so what I did was I wrote a caption that aligned with some of the emotional psychoeducation that I use with my therapy clients. And so I worked toward humanizing Simone, making guesses about the emotional experience, which might be guilt, embarrassment, disappointment, or failure, and I related that back to the broader human experience, that we are more than our jobs, more than our salaries, our sports, our hobbies. These are things that I talk about in therapy with my clients all the time. And so this one is also harder to cite because it's a really dense like psychological theory of emotions, and I don't know if people want me to go into why all of that is, but everything that is rooted there is rooted in psychological theory that I've shared. And so it's things that I would share with my clients, and therefore I feel okay posting something like this online. But the topic here is one that is sensational, and it is highly emotional because I'm able to tap into the human experience. And that leads to it being shared. And so when we break down this post, it was liked 1,051 times. It received 25 comments. It was shared 1,221 times and was saved 203 times, ultimately reaching 15,038 people. And so this exact post that I shared, 15,000 people saw it in the caption that I wrote. And so because it is that sensational and highly emotional, it is able to be shared and people are able to see it. And when we break down the other side, you'll see that nearly 14,000 of them are unique accounts who were not following me at the time. And so that speaks to the ways that it's being shared and people are able to see it. And it looks like 12,000 of them were coming from hashtags. I don't know what that means because it's kind of vague, and Instagram doesn't really provide doesn't really say what that thing is. Homepage is where you're scrolling through your feed and it's coming up that way, and then profile is where they're going to look at my profile and they find it that way. But ultimately I ended up gaining 114 followers from this post. My next top performing post is this one that I posted on Valentine's Day. This was another repost. I didn't make this one, but this is one that I think is highly emotional. And so this was shared on Valentine's Day this year. And I don't know about you, but my Valentine's Day feed is just dozens of couples and wedding photos, and everyone's just celebrating their love. And I know that that makes people who don't have that experience feel pretty bad. And so what I did was, I was like, I want to be able to reach the people who aren't feeling the love today, and was able to tap into that human experience, focusing on emotions. And so what I did was I found a post that I thought really captured that I felt comfortable sharing. So it talks about people are able to feel seen in those hearts, so battling depression or anxiety, can't find peace in what's happening for themselves, are currently fighting with someone, processing trauma, feeling pandemic burnout. And so I was also really busy this day, and I was like, I should probably post something, and that is all that I wrote for a caption was, Happy Valentine's Day, this is a repost, this holiday's hard, and I hope you find a way to feel some love today. And this post was liked 2,308 times, it got 8 comments, and was shared 5,256 times, and it received 726 saves. And ultimately, it reached 8,748 people because it is this highly emotional post that people were able to resonate with. I used hashtags. I'm not sure what those hashtags were, but 2,000 of those people found me through that. And then 5,941 found me through it being shared by other people. You'll see the breakdown that nearly 8,000 of those were people who were not following me, and only 866 of those were people who were following me. And so again, what I want to highlight is like this, we can use those same principles that allow misinformation to spread in order to share information that does resonate with the human experience and is also evidence-based. And so that's where I'm going to shift into with some of these next ones. And so this is my third top performing post that says catching COVID-19 does not mean that you failed. And I think this is one that is highly emotional because I posted this in January, and so I know that I had Omicron right when I posted this, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like I'd done everything right. I got my vaccine as soon as I could in January 2020 or 2021. And then I got my second dose like the day that I was eligible for it. I got my booster as soon as I was allowed to, and that was in October 2021. And then January 2022, I have COVID. And I'm like, what did I do? Like, I thought I did everything right. I wasn't going in these large crowds. I was wearing my mask everywhere. And so there was this like emotional experience that I was having with it of, oh my gosh, like how did this happen? And it is one that is also polarizing because it is talking about COVID, which is a topic that had become kind of polarizing in that sense. And so what I was thinking about was my experience, and then I saw something that was shared by the American Psychological Association where they have a weekly newsletter of things that people are talking about. And it linked to an article in the Washington Post that was titled, "Thousands Who Follow the Rules Are About to Get COVID and They Shouldn't Be Ashamed." And it cited a licensed psychologist who shared things that you can do to cope. And so what I did was I used something that is kind of like clickbaity. That is my phrasing that I used. It captured people's attention. They have a reaction to it, and then they read what I wrote here. And so I don't have the whole caption because it was really long. But it included coping methods. It latched on to that emotional experience that people were having, gave them things that they can do in order to cope and make sense of this thing. So it's all rooted in this behavioral theory and in psychology. And so this one was liked 272 times, received 5 comments, was shared 221 times, and was saved 93 times, and ultimately ended up reaching 4,775 people based on this thing that I created based on my own emotional experience and something that is polarizing. And so it reached nearly 4,000 people who weren't following me, and that's something that always shocks me. I ended up gaining 46 followers from this post. The last one that I shared, I ended up gaining like 300 and some odd followers from that one. And then there's this last one that I'm going to show. This is top performing post number 4. And I created this one, so I love it when the ones that I create do well. But I created this one because I think it's a relevant topic in mental health care. If you are a physician or a pharmacist and there's something incorrect on that, please let me know so I can fix it. And so with that, I wanted to create something that was educational, and that is something that I feel like I'm doing a lot in my own psychotherapy sessions with my clients. It's talking about, this is medication, this is what it can be used for, it's okay to do it, these are some of the myths that happen. And so this is one that I think is kind of polarizing because there are a lot of really strong opinions about medication for treating mental health where people are like, I don't want to do that, I'm going to be a zombie. And other people are like, please give me something like immediately, where people are in these two camps. And so what I did was I humanized the experience and refuted some of the myths that I've heard, and then also provided the education that I also provide in psychotherapy, which is like it's probably going to take about 6 weeks before you notice that there's been an impact. It might take a little bit to find the one that really works for you, and that's okay. And it encourages conversations with prescribers and then refutes more of the myths that perpetuate stigma. I also highlight what I call like the Yelp review effect, or maybe like the Amazon product reviews, where the reviews that you only see are the ones that are like 5 stars or 1 star, and it's not highlighting all of the experiences that happen in the middle. So just a reminder that if you're seeing information online, you're probably seeing the extreme opinions that are going to cause reactions rather than all of the like normalized human experiences that exist. We don't see the 3-star reviews. And so just naming, if folks are doing a lot of reading about these, it's gonna be like, you might see some that are really scary, and that's not everyone's experience with it. But that post was like 239 times and ultimately ended up reaching 2,450 accounts. And most of, about 50-50, where 1,093 of them were following me, and then 1,357 were not. Hashtags did really well here with 1,007 folks finding me from that. And then 217 of them in that other content, which I think means that it's coming from shares on Instagram. And I ended up gaining 26 followers from that post. And so I'm breaking down that when we use these same principles that allow misinformation to share, we can also share evidence-based information in the same way. And so when we do that, we have to think about like how we can engage in this science communication. And we have to have what is a good hook to really capture attention and stop the scroll. This might be the term clickbait, where people are interested in it, so you have like a very brief amount of time to capture someone's attention. So when you're creating these posts, one that I like to do is thinking of like action movie titles, or X number of tips to do this, or everything that you need to know about how you can unlock this. And so these are things that really capture folks' attention. And so when we are able to capture their attention, then we can talk about why this matters to them, and it allows them to be seen and then therefore feel represented. But the thing when it comes to this is that as folks who are healthcare providers and we do have advanced degrees, we are trained to engage with scientific information very differently. And so you have to flip it. So when we think about the ways that science is communicated in our fields, when we think about a manuscript, so we always, when you're reading a manuscript, it's going to start with the introduction. It's going to talk about relevant information and, hey, here's this problem. After that, we're going to go into our methods. We're going to talk about, okay, so we found this problem, and this is what we're going to do to be able to figure it out. And then we're going to be like, these are the things that we found, but I'm not going to give you any context about what this stuff means. And then we go into the discussion section, which is, this is what we found, and this is why it matters to you. And that's just the general like flow of a manuscript. However, lay populations like that, that's not what they're interested in. That's not what they want to see. They want to see the conclusion first and why it matters. And so that's what you want to do is say like, this is what we're talking about here. And this is what we did to get here. And here's some other information that might be interesting to you. So we have to flip the ways that we are thinking about communicating with other folks. But ultimately, this is what we found. This is why it matters to you, is how we have to start all of our communication that's taking place on social media. That's after we've captured their attention, we have to let them know, like, this is what we're talking about, and then this is why it matters to you. And then you can give all the fluffy information. But I think that we have to engage in some different steps in order to make this happen. And so the first is know your audience. Like, who are we talking to? Who are those folks that we are reaching? What do they already know about the thing that you're going to share? What are they interested in, and what do they want to learn? So if you are interested in engaging with this on social media, what you might do is find an account or someone else who is in your field who's doing something similar and figure out which ones of their posts are doing the best. And that's what folks are interested in. The next is you want to make sure that you bring everyone along. You have to define the jargon so that way your audience comes with you. If you are sharing something and there's going to be some jargon that comes from your field or a really big word, or something that you would have to explain, if they don't know what that is, they're going to scroll. You have a very limited amount of time in order to maintain folks' attention on social media. And so then you also want to use relevant examples and analogies, like, hey, this might be how this comes up for you, so that way you can tap into that human experience, the shared humanity that we all have, and this is why this is relevant and important to you. You also have to shape the message, and so that's what I mean about this hook. Think about your movie titles. You need to draw the attention and highlight the relevance of why does this matter. Then talk about like, this is important or interesting, alarming, exciting because, and then that's what's going to maintain attention and what allows your post to be shared further. You also want to name like, this is why this might affect you. This is why this is important and a big deal. And those are the things that are going to resonate with folks and therefore allows the information to be shared. And if you want to also grow the account, other things that you might be engaging in are the call to action. I don't know how many of you are journalists or know a little bit about journalism, but articles usually have some type of call to actions like you need to call your representatives right now or do this or do that. On social media, that might be make sure you like this post or make sure you comment, which are all the things that are going to trip the algorithm, which then allow your information to be shared again. So we can continue to use those things that allow this information to spread without, or that allow us to share it in a way that is evidence-based. And so other things that are challenging are that, I don't know about your fields, but in mine there are topics that are very trendy right now. And I just try to avoid them because I think that they're trendy for a reason. And so the ones that I'm noticing the most mainly on TikTok and on Instagram is that people are doing a lot of diagnosing themselves with neurodivergence, which is autism spectrum disorder or ADHD. So they're seeing posts that people are creating that aren't quite evidence-based, and it's like, these are 5 signs that you might have ADHD, but it's rooted in their own experience rather than the evidence, and so then that information shares, and then people are coming into therapy and they're like, hey, I think I have this because I listened to this song on repeat 4 times. And I was like, I don't think you have ADHD. And so I'm noticing a lot of that coming in where people are doing a lot of self-diagnosis. In my field, which is psychology and therapy, there's a lot of people posting about toxic this and toxic that. So seeing a lot of like toxic positivity, toxic masculinity. And I think that those are important conversations, but then I also see people talking about my workplace is toxic, my mom is toxic, everybody's toxic. And so those are, again, these are things that I just generally try to avoid because they aren't really evidence-based. Those are things that are kind of trendy in my field right now. There's been a lot of talk about personality disorders in my field as well. A lot of talk about narcissistic personality disorder as well as borderline personality disorder. They're saying, I think that this person is a narcissist because this, and this. And it's like, well, they might have just been mean without having to diagnose them with a personality disorder. And so I actually tried to share a post that was like, this is what narcissistic personality disorder is, and I used like the diagnostic criteria. Post did not do well. So I tried to share the evidence-based information, but it is different than the dominant discourse that's already happening. So I just try to avoid posting about those things. But the thing is, I know that if I do post about them, then they will be shared widely. And so I think that goes into some of the ethical obligations that we have to have as providers in order to maintain the integrity of our fields. Dissociation is also another really common one that I'm seeing come up where they're like, I'm really stressed right now, so I'm just not going to think about what's stressing me out. And that's dissociating. And I'm like, wait, I think that's just compartmentalizing and focusing on the other things that are important. So there are a lot of terms in the field that people really latch onto because they're learning about it on social media. It might not be accurate. And so, unfortunately, the thing with being providers or healthcare professionals who are on social media is that our governing bodies do not have any guidelines for us. There are very little recommendations about what to do if you do want to maintain a professional presence. The ethical guidelines that I can find basically say, make sure that you don't follow your patients or clients and make sure that you keep your professional accounts separate. And those are like the 2 ones that are about it. There isn't a lot of other guidance that exists here. And so I've created some that I'm going to share, which would, again, keep your professional accounts separate from your personal accounts. You do not want your patients or clients following your personal accounts and knowing that you're on vacation or your toddler is potty training. Like, sometimes folks just don't need to know that information, and so we keep that separate. We want to clearly state that the social media presence is not a replacement for treatment or a relationship with a mental health professional, so that way folks are still going into, they're still getting care, and social media is not taking over what that looks like. You want to avoid sharing confidential information or de-identified confidential information on social media. Platforms where a client might recognize like, oh, wait, that's about me. And so we want to make sure that we avoid that. If you have encountered a case that does feel really interesting, think about the ways that you can change it so that way that patient or client isn't able to look at it and be like, oh, this is about me if they do follow you. Try to avoid diagnosing individuals in social media posts, even if they are public figures. Yeah, try to avoid that one. I don't know about you all, but my social media feeds was filled with people trying to diagnose Will Smith for hitting Chris Rock at the Oscars. And I was like, let's try it. No, like, please don't diagnose folks, because part of like our ethical obligation when we're working with our patients and clients is that they come in and they see us, and that's where the diagnosis happens. And we always say, we can't diagnose you without seeing you or seeing you in the room, like, I don't fully know. And it's that same thing on social media where we can't look at what someone is posting and then diagnose them. It doesn't work. And then also make sure that you accurately portray your education, licensure, accreditation, and expertise. This is basically saying post within the scope of your competence in the same way that we say make sure that you're practicing within your scope of competence. And so share like, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, this is my education. So for me, like, I name that I'm a PhD student, I am not a licensed psychologist yet. And so it's naming that this is who this information is coming from so that way they can develop trust with me in that sense. I would highly argue that everything that you share should be evidence-based, properly cited, and come from reputable, trustworthy sources. Because this is the information that folks are engaging with. If they see that you're a professional, they're going to be like, I saw that this professional shared this. And so they're engaging with what we're sharing, we want to make sure that it is something that we would say to a patient or client if they were to sit in front of us. And then I would highly recommend developing a social media policy for yourself as it relates to patients and clients, or any students that you are working with. And so I have lots of former clients and current clients who follow me, and that is pretty uncomfy. And so some of the boundaries that I just set for myself is saying that I'm not going to interact with you on there. You cannot send me a direct message, because then it changes the way that our relationship functions. If I teach undergraduate students and sometimes they search me and then they end up finding my account, I haven't figured out how they do that yet. I need to figure out how they're attaching my name with the account. So TBD, I'll let you know what happens there. But I would say that I tell them, if you are my current student, you are following me, I'm not going to engage with you. You can continue following me after our semester is over and I've submitted your grades to the registrar, so that way I'm not maintaining an evaluative role over them and expanding the way that our relationship functions. Do not share advice or offer services through direct message on social media platforms. One, because confidentiality rules, where in our email signatures, we usually say that be aware that email is not a secure platform, or it is not confidential. Our DMs on Instagram are especially not confidential. I don't know how many of you have ever said something in a direct message and then suddenly all your targeted ads are that. And so that information is not confidential, and so work to avoid doing that. And then make sure that if you're talking about a condition, make sure that you clearly address the conditions. The diagnoses and disorders are very complex. A post on Instagram is not going to fully capture what this looks like. And that allows the human experience to come in. And then lastly, provide links to crisis intervention resources. If someone is in the middle of a crisis and they are Googling, or searching on Instagram psychologist or physician, and they find your Instagram account, then they DM you in order to get advice, probably not a good route to go. And so make sure that you can provide resources to them. This is one of the things especially comes up for me as a therapist with suicidality. And so if someone is in a crisis, I want them to be able to access a suicide hotline instead of coming to me directly, is also just an ethical protection for myself. So that way I am not liable for this person's safety if they DM'd me through Instagram. But the thing is, with social media, sometimes people have a lot of opinions and a lot of things to say, and they might not always be nice. And so when that happens, make sure that you approach hostile comments or responses or replies with gratitude, with empathy and curiosity. And it's important to know when to stand your ground versus accepting feedback. And so an example of this would be that I've had 2 of these happen in the past week, where someone is on a recent post, someone said that it was messed up, that the font was smaller, which therefore meant that their problem was more insignificant. I was like, okay, thank you. And so that's what I mean by approach with this gratitude. Hey, thanks for the feedback on that. And naming I'm sorry that it feels like you aren't being represented here. And so in that, afterward, they replied hey, thanks for hearing me out. I really shouldn't have projected that onto you. Because I approached with gratitude, hey, thanks for that, and then empathy for their experience. And then the hostility stopped because I was able to see them and hear them for what was happening for them. And then also just curiosity. If someone says something, be good idea. Tell me more about that. And then maybe they might be onto something. You're yes, I'll do that in my next post. And so come at a place where you're ready to approach with curiosity rather than feeling critical about the feedback that they're offering you. And then sometimes you're gonna wanna know when to be no, I'm sticking to my guns, versus thank you for sharing that with me. I really appreciate the feedback. And so you have to decide what your moral and ethical standpoints are for when to stand your ground versus accept the feedback. And to wrap it up here, I would say that my biggest thing is that we can share evidence-based and credible information on social media in the exact same ways that misinformation spreads. When we tap into the human experience and the concepts that are sensational, emotional, or pull on strong opinions, we are able to have that information that is shared, and it can be evidence-based. You want to capture their attention with words and graphics, and then also maintain the integrity of your profession online. It's no different than someone who's stepping into your office, and we become ambassadors to our fields when we are online. And so with that, when we are there, our information spreads pretty quickly, to the point that, as you saw earlier, 33,000 people my things that I created have been seen 33,000 times, and that is a lot, and it allows us to really expand our reach. And so with that, what questions do you have? Yeah. Oh.
Thank you so much for this really great talk. I had a question around, sorry, I lost my train of thought. If you've, w- I was trying to take a look at the Instagram post or Instagram account while you were chatting, but I realized I can't do both things at the same time. So apologies if
No worries.
you've covered this, but what are some of the tactics that you may have done to communicate with communities of color? Because I know mental health is a stigma for many of those communities. So if you had anything to share or any learnings or how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I do, like every single post in my caption is going to include something that does have an equity focus. And so that's a goal whenever I am posting something, is that's there. But then other times, like some of the posts that I'm creating are very focused on the experience for people who do have minoritized identities. And so that might be focusing on like, this is how you can cope with microaggressions, or these are the ways that we experience vicarious trauma when we do see experiences of police brutality that are shared on social media, like naming the ways that like mental health is really impacted in communities of color by the things that are happening in our day-to-day lives. And yeah, I think that's the main way, is thinking about what topics are really salient for these communities. And then if it's more of a general topic, then it's working to maintain that equity and social justice focus in the caption.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this talk. This is amazing. I love your outreach. I have some logistical questions.
Yeah.
So I see that you also have videos on here. Have
Yes.
you? So those seem to have a pretty large, I guess watch rate, whatever, whatever that is. So how often do you do those, and is that something that you would do versus the posts, or?
So that's a hard one, because the Instagram algorithm is working very hard to compete with TikTok, which is all video focused. And so Instagram is largely prioritizing video content. And when someone does post a video, it is going to get shared onto more people's feeds than what just a post does. And so it's naming that that's the direction that Instagram is moving. And I don't love it. I don't love posting videos. It doesn't feel genuine or like congruent to who I am. And I'm sure I could probably find ways to go about it and do that. And it's also a lot of work to create those. And so I don't think I've created one probably since August, or maybe even like July is probably the last time that I created one, just because one, they take a lot of time, and two, they don't align with like who I am or the ways that I want to share information. And so I choose not to. And I recognize that if I did make the decision to, that they would have a really, really wide reach, because that's the way that the algorithm is working right now. And yeah, I think that's probably where I'll leave that logistically, is that I know that it will work, but I don't like it, so I'm not going to.
Well, if it's not authentic, then that's not, if you don't feel authentic doing it, then that's going to show. So, and I understand what you're talking about. The algorithm really determines how you use their platform, right?
Yes.
Depending on what your desired outcome is. I have a question about how often you respond to comments on your. Do you respond to comments? Do you respond to DMs? How do you do that, and how often do you do that? Because that's my concern, is if I start doing this, do I need to be watching it all day long every day so that I can reply so I look like I'm engaged? I don't know.
Yes. So the comments that I reply to are the ones that have like actual text, and someone's asking a question, they're giving feedback, they're talking about why they like it. That's the comment that I'm going to reply to. I get a lot of comments from other like therapists who are talking about things, and they'll just like post a heart, and it's like, oh, thank you, that's cute. But I'm usually not going to reply to those, because that just feels like another task to add into my day. And so I don't get a lot of, the DMs that I get most frequently are those that are people who are recruiting for research studies, and they see that I have a following, so they want me to share their study on my feed. And I tried to do that for a couple friends, but my follower count drops dramatically when I do that, so I quit doing that. But I probably will recruit for my dissertation study through there, so hopefully people stick around. But I tend to not reply to those because I get a lot of them, probably like 3 to 4 a day of people who are asking me to share their research study. And I also get a lot of folks who are sharing something that I've created on their story, and then they tag me. And so when it tags me, I get a DM that they've tagged me. So then I just reply with, hey, thanks for sharing, as a way to like build that digital relationship with them.
So Instagram etiquette.
Yes.
So is there a way to shut off DMs on Instagram?
You can turn off your push notifications. Or if you aren't, and one thing when you do have a professional account on Instagram is that they all get turned into message requests. So sometimes you just don't even see them. And so you can go through and approve them or deny if you want to see them.
Got it.
But I would look and see who is messaging you and determine whether or not you want to reply to them or not, or accept the message or not.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Hi, what kind of tools do you use to create the posts? Things like Canva or anything else that you would suggest?
Yep, I use Canva for everything. This whole PowerPoint was created in Canva. And so I pay for Canva Premium, which is $15 a month. And that's what I use. And so it allows me to have a lot of access to better font and better pictures. And so every single image that's in this thing, or in this presentation, comes from the Canva Premium. Yeah. What other questions?
So our organization has a Facebook account, I think an Instagram, and what they've done recently is recruited / asked those of us within different departments to create posts. And so with regards to the audience, those are things that I don't think we really know. Like, we don't have that information. We don't know, the reach that our posts are having. Most of the time there's not a lot of interaction because we don't have that information to create the posts to do that. So I'm just wondering, without it being your personal or / professional account, what kind of suggestions do you have for creating posts for an organization's account?
So I would have it focused in the organization's mission. What is your organization working to do? Like, what is the goal? And then who is your organization trying to serve? And think about them as your audience in mind. And it's like, imagine who is our, if we were to be able to paint a picture of the people that our organization serves, like, what would they look like generally? And then create posts for them would be the way that I would initially say to get started with it. And then see how they're performing, like how many likes are they getting. I would also recommend that it's move away from the stock photos, because stock photos generally just don't get shared as much. And so find ways to create things that are like you all and who the organization is, or when you're out in the community, this is what it's looking like if you're sharing actual photos. And then if you want to create things that are informational, use the little cartoons and things like that, because those are more likely to get shared. And stock photos feel like very professional, kind of buttoned up, and people are less likely to share those. And so that would be the ways that I would recommend getting started. And then find ways to use those calls to action that's saying like, hey, comment on this, or like this post, or share this with a friend, as a way to continue to spread the word out. Yeah. What other questions? Yeah.
But as was alluded to earlier, because of what you do as a profession, how much time do you actually pour into doing this part of your role? How much time?
A lot. It is so much work, and I feel like that is something that I did not realize I was getting myself into when I created this account. And so depending on how big the post is, like if it has multiple slides in it, I'm probably spending 2 hours creating a single post. I find that the captions also take me a while to type up and create. And so if I allowed it to, this could very easily be an additional part-time job where I'm spending 20 hours a week doing it. But I don't post that frequently, and I wish that I did, because then it would lead to a wider following because more things are getting shared, more people are reacting to it, and it would grow it. And so that is one thing that I just acknowledge and know is that I don't have the time to contribute into growing it beyond where it's at now, and feeling pretty proud of like what it's done. And so I would say that on average, like monthly right now, probably like 5 to 6 hours a month is where I'm at. And that's posting probably like every other week right now because I'm really busy with like my dissertation and things like that. But it has the potential to take up a lot of time. If I had money to pay someone, I would hire an intern.
Thank you. Really great topic and great work with people of color, trying to get them more engaged in mental health. My other question would be, how far in advance do you plan your content? Like, was the Valentine's Day post planned, like you knew, okay, this is what I'm doing, March is for this, April is that?
In an ideal world, I would love to have like content, whole posts and captions planned out a month in advance would be in an ideal world, but that doesn't feel like totally capable for me right now. So I think I'm usually at about like 2 weeks out, based on, is there a day that's coming up? Is there a holiday? Is there something that's coming up for folks? Every month I create a post that is like self-care that you can do this month, and those do really well, which is also like rooted in a like well-being model that is cited in my field a lot. And so those are the monthly ones that I think I use most frequently, and that is one that I can always plan on. But about 2 weeks is probably what I would say, although a month in advance would be really great.
Okay, and we'll take one last question.
Okay, I'm going to cheat and ask 2 questions. Okay. One, do you find success using like national health observances to like build posts around? And then the second question is, have you ever done or considered like social media takeovers with other professionals who might be doing the same work?
Mm-hmm. And so national observances, yes, because people love to share things when there are different holidays that are happening. So like Mother's Day post, Valentine's Day post, when things are happening in the news, I could have very well posted something about Will Smith at the Oscars and it would have like done really well. So when things are happening, those are things when I post about like what's happening in our world. And then, yeah, so those do well. And then I haven't thought about doing a takeover just because I don't know if I have the time or the rationale or the time or the ability to really plan for it and be intentional about who I'm asking to take over or what would that takeover look like. That might be something when I do have more time to contribute to it, like the 20 hours a week that I wish I could do. That might be when I'm more likely to do that because then I'm more present on it, and therefore it won't be as jarring when there's someone who isn't normally present who's showing up.
Last question.
Again, thank you. I saw that you have people different ages follow you, and what are the young people actually looking for, and what are the older people actually looking for? You see their feedback, right?
I mean, I think the feedback that I get from the account is like how well a post is doing. And so I wish that Instagram would give me the age demographic and breakdown per post, but I only get location, and I only get location per post. And so that's one of the things that does make it hard because it's a lot of trial and error in figuring out like, okay, here's this post, this did well, what made this post go well, and thinking about different themes. And so I know that my self-care posts, those do pretty well, and so that's why I make sure that they're consistent on the account. Or the different type of posting format that I've been using a lot lately, which is like the 6 figures with the little line or 2 underneath those. Those tend to do well. And so as a result, I know that's what people are interested in looking at, and so then I continue to create posts that look like that. And so when I am creating content, I'm thinking about like broadly, what am I hearing about in the field? What are people talking about most right now? And so sometimes that is a lot of boundaries. Sometimes that is like questions about medication, and those might be the things that I'm more likely to post as long as it feels aligned with the work that I'm doing instead of something that is happening that feels trendy. So aligning with the work is where I make sure that I stay grounded. Is like, what is something, like a general theme, like what are people wanting from me right now? And then I imagine that's probably consistent across the board. And so I think around this time of year, it's naming like, yay, spring is coming. But also I feel really bad because that's also something that is a general thing that happens in psych, where people think that everyone's going to feel better in the springtime because the sun's out, but distress actually increases most in the spring. And so that's something that I'm going to be posting more about, because I know that that's a general thing that is rooted in the research and the science of my field that is happening for people right now. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.